Welcome into HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm sitting under a gazebo in a courtyard between the Basketball Performance Center here on the campus of the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville and a parking lot where the media was ushered into today. It was our first ever on-campus open practice for the media since John Calipari took over as head hog back in April of 2024. A lot going on today. We got to view about an hour of practice, about the first 15 minutes of which we were able to record video of what the team was working on, and I put a lot of that out already on social media on my Twitter account or X, and then we had to turn cameras off and just observe. At that point I picked up when they were playing 3-on-3 that turned into 4-on-4 and then 5-on-5, details about what was going on the court. And so, already a lot of content out there. I got a lot more to go. I've already did some post-game interview video stuff that I've also put on Twitter with 4 players that were selected to do that: Trevon, DJ Wagner, Malik Thomas, Nick Pringle, followed by John Calipari. So I've already tweeted out some of that content, more of that to come as well. So I'm going to be busy in Fayetteville before I head back down the hill, back to the 501. Interesting things, the things we talk about on a daily basis, and just some of it's speculation, but it's based on patterns in the history of John Calipari, the brief history at Arkansas. Like scheduling. Why is he scheduled a tougher non-conference? Part of my talking point is he has belief in the situation in year 2 in terms of retention. The overall picture of how he constructed a roster, it's not just about throwing them into the fire early and see what happens by the time you get to SEC play. It's about having belief in what you're building in terms of being able to weather some of those storms, win some of those games, and maybe you've got a roster worthy of challenges like what we've talked about so much with non-conference scheduling. And so Calipari acknowledges that. He said it's based on what you have. He said last year, it was a little bit different. This year, a lot of it's based on what he's got and not just about, whether, we might sink more than we swim, but maybe it gets us ready for SEC play. And if that happens, it will help them get ready for SEC play. If it happens that they fail more than they succeed in what's a tough non-conference. But so much that Calipari went into today. He talked about some things he'd like to see different and changed in college basketball. Thinks that teams should be able to play a foreign summer tour every year. Thinks that the transfer stuff should be limited. He's talked about that before. He really spoke more on that than probably any one thing today. Discussed having a conference preseason tournament instead of a postseason tournament. And then the regular season conference champ gets the automatic bid. Some interesting concepts. Teams playing, just like the NBA is going through summer league, college teams playing, going through playing other teams. Obviously it doesn't count. But like a summer league for college programs this time of year. A lot of different things he hit on, but specific to this team, one of the things I brought up to the players was I really noticed today, because three-point shooting, especially in the competitive stuff, was not at a premium, and it looked like some guys that had open shots were reluctant and they drove the ball. And we know three-point shooting is a question mark, and some of the shell transition work where guys aren't defended, guys started knocking threes down. I kind of chronicled this stuff in some of my tweets, gave analysis. But what I did notice was the guard play interacting with the big men and how they were playing through the bigs out on the perimeter, whether it was screen action, dribble handoff action on the wings or out high. There was a lot of really good stuff working with guys like Trevon, Nick Pringle, Malik Ewan, interacting in those scenarios with Darius Acuff Jr., DJ Wagner. Sometimes it was Malik Thomas on the ball. We know Billy Richmond III, we're going to see him get his opportunities. Calipari said that in the press conference. Don't forget we have a third lead guard. So the freshmen, probably their strongest play today was in sharing the basketball. They seem to be buying in there. I asked Calipari about the young players and the fact that much of his backcourt he's leaning on first-year guys. And then I brought up the names, Acuff, Malik Thomas, and to some degree Isaiah Seeley. And he kind of went into the learning curve stuff and what they're trying to get him each to do. With Malik Thomas, the whole principle of less is more, and he likes to dribble a lot to get to his shots because he's comfortable. And so that's another thing. When you go back to a season ago, even though the team wasn't doing as much team stuff this time of year in the limited work, it was mostly individual development. I remember the the first press conference after they wrapped up the limited stuff, and Calipari was talking about making Nelly Davis uncomfortable in the drill work, just simple individual drill work, put him in situations he's not used to so that he learns, even if it confuses him initially, because that's how you learn, and make him uncomfortable. So that was a theme again today. Nick Pringle talked about, since he's been here, Calipari challenging him and put him in scenarios that make him uncomfortable. Then Calipari later talked more about that, sharing some of the same stuff, talking about Malik Thomas, trying to get less is more with the bounce. Take a shot that's there off good ball movement, off someone else's creativity. Maybe one dribble, maybe no dribbles, but take the available shot. And you did see some of that in the drill work today when there was a little bit of defense and closeouts. Guys that had open looks that didn't want to take them, they thought, well, I'll drive here, and then they got in trouble a little bit. But, if I had to call out, any one particular player from start to finish who maybe stood out the most to me, it was probably Trevon Brazil. And these were similar talking points we had a year ago. We didn't have this opportunity. Again, this is the first on-campus practice situation that media has been able to attend since Calipari's been here. But what they did do, they took their show on the road. Calipari took them to Hot Springs, Pine Bluff on back-to-back days on a weekend. I was at both events from start to finish, and they didn't have other big bodies available to defend Trevon. They were using big GAs. Remember, Jonas Adu was limited due to injury. He wasn't doing any of the little semi-live contact stuff, at that time. And then you had Big Z out there, but not really a physical challenge. And so TB kind of opened some eyes with some of the stuff he was doing, and we're like, this could be his year. And then we saw how it played out, and then he looked like the guy in the last 9 games that we were seeing back in, preseason in Hot Springs and Pine Bluff. Today he looked every bit. He looked even better. He looked stronger. I put out a highlight reel. It was all him. It was uninterrupted, so I wasn't just selectively cutting and pasting them into a tweet. It was one reel. It starts off with a really nice defensive play and then some offensive work. He really stood out to me at times. There were some moments in the 4-on-4 and 5-on-5 where it looked like contact bothered him on finishing some stuff. But overall, I gave him, a solid A. I'm not going to grade everybody. I guess I just started to. But I was impressed by a lot. I was really impressed again with Acuff, DJ Wagner, and at times Malik Thomas in how they reacted to and played through their big men off of that screen action or dribble handoffs, really getting downhill and then making defenders choose. And if they hesitated at all on the help or if it was their assignment on the big, they just dropped a lob pass or made a bounce pass to the right spot. And even if the big didn't get a clean look, which they mostly did, if the help recovered, there was a guy crashing from the opposite side going to the dunker spot, like a Carter Knox or a Billy Richmond, and the bigs were making the right play. Again, I put some tweets out with some of this stuff. Some of it was really impressive. I liked a lot of their drill work that they did was started defensively on one end, like closeouts, start in the paint, close out to the wing, and you did it on each side. Whistle blows, you go to one side to close out, you come back to the middle, go to the other side, and then the two defenders that are operating in that mode then get out and transition. One guy dribbles into the paint to the SEC logo, kicks out to the other one who flared out to one of the corners, and then after the pass, the playmaker flared out to the other opposite three-point line, and they took threes. Now, that was uncontested, but out of the top 10 guys that did that in pairs of 2, so five different rotations on this, 9 out of 10 knocked down threes. That was everybody in that top 8 rotation plus Isaiah Sealy and Jaden Carroll-Letwa. The only player that didn't hit a 3 in that drill was Nick Pringle when it went through the first run, the first 5 reps of it. And Pringle was close. His kind of, bounded off, but it wasn't like a total brick. So no defenders, but it's still good to see guys, by that point in the practice, guys had broken a good sweat and maybe were feeling it a little bit. But when you really looked at anything that was competitive, when it started out with some 3-on-3 drill work, starting one side of the court and then playing off 2-man game on that side with an off-ball guy on the other side and then kind of working through some of that. The threes that were put up by the guards, not so good. Isaiah Sealy popped a 3, Trevon Brazil did. I think Malik Ewan hit one. It was really kind of some of the guys you wouldn't necessarily see a whole lot. Actually got to watch a practice. Yeah, it was exciting. And again, I've got a lot more content to put out. I've put some out, a lot more to go. But remember, it's we got only 15 minutes to roll cameras on the action, and we were there inside of there for about an hour. So the final 45, you're just making mental notes. I'm tweeting out as much as I can with detail. I put a lot of detail. When they started 4-on-4, started keeping score, going full court, and then it ramped up to 5-on-5. And so by the end of it, I think it was the white team that won 18-14 or 18-12, something like that. I tweeted it out with the accurate numbers. But the white team jumped out, I think, either 6-0 or 8-0. And so it was pretty competitive after that. But the truth is the white team had an advantage when that play started, because the red team, when the whistle blew, was starting at half court with defenders already lined up and in position to defend. And that's what started the action. And so after the red team would attack, any mistake, a long rebound, a steal, a turnover, a live ball turnover, the white team was getting out in transition and got some easy buckets. So it was kind of misleading a little bit. I thought I would give that part of an explanation of what was going on there. I go back to it. This team is more physical than last year's team. You got big bodies that know how to play. Think about the experience now. Trevon Brazile playing at this level, looking his best that he's ever looked. The post-game press conference, I don't know if you've seen any of it yet. I tweeted out some of it. The dude is more responsive, locked in, and thoughtful, not trying to bag on him for last year, but he's kind of a stoic, quiet guy. Sometimes you can take that as being aloof. Man, this guy was sharp everywhere today, and you really like to see that, especially for a veteran guy. Now maybe there's some leadership qualities here going on in terms of not just how he vocalizes to players, but just setting an example. This is how you do it. Very businesslike, and the talent is just unreal. I mean, the guy looked really good today. Nick Pringle did some really good things, as did Malik Ewan. Malik Thomas, I thought, did try to force a bit. Calipari's right about that, but he got on a little bit of a heater. He had a nice drive left to about a 16-footer pull-up mid-range shot. Nothing wrong with that. It was open. Then he got a steal and went in and finished with a layup in transition. And I think after a DJ Wagner score, he went probably over dribbled. He absolutely did. He had either Knox or Billy Richmond III draped all over him. And he still took a fadeaway shot, which he made. But this is what Calipari's talking about. And he stopped things. He goes, look, you're going to have to make that every time if I'm going to be okay with you taking that. And I get it. Move the ball. Less is more. Learn how to play and benefit playing off the ball. And even off the bounce. If you don't get it in one or two dribbles, you really need to be moving it somewhere else and then moving yourself. And so I get that. And we've seen Arkansas players over the years in these settings when we get invited in, where there's always one or two guys where the staff has to kind of drill down on. That's just one of many things. But Calipari's talked about all the conditioning they've done, going 20 suicides in 20 minutes. And I think he said when Kareem Artal, the Lebanese forward who's, been part of the team but hasn't been taking part for a while, we brought you that information from our source info from inside the building that he was in street clothes and not practicing for a couple of practices a couple of weeks ago. Well, he's still in street clothes, and apparently there's a back issue there. I can say that now because Calipari addressed that. But he said Artal, whenever he's cleared and ready to go, he's still got some conditioning work to do. He's got to do 8 of those 20 suicides in 20 minutes. So conditioning, and Calipari said at this point for most everybody, they're pretty much done with it. But that is a big part of what he wants for this team. And then you saw it in a lot of the drills today, because they didn't just focus on doing drill work on one end of the court. They were expanding what started at one end and then getting in transition and doing some things. And that'll test your legs. And certainly once you continue to do that, as you get more tired, fatigue, you want to see guys respond, step up, and knock down some of those shots at the end of those drills. This will only help them do that. He mentioned multiple times he wants to see guys. He mentioned it during practice. He said it in the post-game presser. He wants to see his players get in the gym on their own more. They need to own that. They need to wrap their arms around it. With Malik Thomas, he said he's a gym rat. So he checks that box. He said he's a bucket getter, and so you like to hear that. Darius Acuff Jr., as talented he is as a scorer, and he's a guy that can go get it. Today, he really focused on not as much getting into his own shot, but setting guys up and being a good distributor of the basketball and just running offense. And I thought that was key, because he can go score, right? He can go do that. But I really thought that was a big deal because I think most of these drills you're wanting to see, you don't want one guy necessarily breaking stuff off because he can. You want to see how things play out in your screen game or your dribble handoff game. Who's moving off the ball? What is your point guard doing to get guys hit him on target and on time with passes? Are they making the extra pass when the ball comes back to them? Those kind of things. And so I thought I've seen this before with guys on previous teams where I know they could be maybe in a practice doing more on their own to impress, but instead they're working on getting better in the things that are really going to help them advance as they move up at each step. And so I thought that was more about maturity today for Acuff than I did, oh, something's missing here. He's off today. I didn't see it that way. I thought he did an outstanding job, as did DJ Wagner. DJ, again, both of these guys weren't pumping in three-point shots. They didn't take a whole lot in the scrimmage stuff. Maybe they took more than I realized, but I didn't think they took a whole lot. Weren't necessarily effective there. But DJ getting in his drive game, when you got to the 4-on-4, 5-on-5, getting downhill and getting to the basket and finishing most of those, as I recall. But again, he was more of a facilitator, more of a setup guy than he was looking for his. And so I think that's real important for this team, especially coming off last year where, you had a guard in Boogie Flan that was really good taking care of the basketball as a facilitator. You look at the assists, you look at the assist turnover numbers. Outside of that, although DJ did some good stuff and ran at times good stuff for others, and even Billy Richmond III also struggling with some turnovers but has some talent there, you want to see the players in those positions taking these opportunities to show that they're more than just a guy that's, kind of hunting a shot. And so are they looking better than last year's team? Well, we didn't see last year's team like this early. Again, when we saw them in Hot Springs and Pine Bluff, you had GAs out there defending. They didn't show as much as they did today in terms of how much they ran trying to do, because the competitive stuff last year that we saw the little bit, again, there are GAs out there, and it was really hard to tell. So yeah, I would say they're ahead of where last year's team was. I think physically they're well ahead of where last year's team was. It's hard to, when you look at how good Boogie Flan was before injury, if you look at what Adu Thero was throughout the year, and he of course got hurt late, you're definitely missing some stuff there. The guy that Jonas Adu became after he got past his injuries, Nelly Davis, he had his moment. So you've lost some important stuff. And now you've got, one of the questions I asked Calipari in the post presser, talk about this youthful backcourt, because you got a lot of guys you're going to be counting on. And so the talent's there. You saw some of it. I did today. How does that translate, though, against live bullets? Well, they got a long way to go in terms of when they have to face that. So they're going to get better and better from a sheer talent, physicality, athleticism, and then the veteran qualities of guys that made a huge impact on a team that had a run last year. I'd say right now this team is better than what I gathered from last year. But again, guys were hurt this time last year. At the end of the day, when I hear Calipari said that he's scheduled the way that he has because he believes that he's got the kind of squad that can handle that, that's all I need to hear, because I already believe that. But when the head coach believes it and says it, man, that carries a lot of weight. And this is the other thing about Calipari. He is a great speaker. The bigger the crowd, the better. He's really good at it. But he's not weaving in these things that I think he really doesn't believe. He's very consistent on his talking points and stuff he mentions about players. I've heard before, either directly from his mouth or from sources telling me. We had an episode a few weeks ago where I came on and I said, look, he's talking to people about Isaiah Seeley, and the words were, he does things on the court that I can't coach. Today, when I asked about the three freshman backcourt wing guys, Acuff, Malik Thomas, and Seeley, when he got around to Seeley, had some good things to say. Also talked about less is more with him, and the thing he focused on was he plays better with the ball in his hands. Kind of similar to Malik, but what do you do? How engaged are you when the ball's not in your hands? But one of the positives he said, as he wrapped that up with, Seeley does things that I can't teach. So he used the word teach, the way we phrase it was coach, but he is consistent in what he says. He's not trying to find something positive to say on the fly when asked a question. He's always been that way, and I think that's what makes him endearing to families, to players. I think he's level, and it shows through in all these different things where, Other coaches will take the easy way. I think he's pretty solid with it. He's a pretty optimistic guy as it goes anyway, but I think when he talks about this team, I do have a sense there is more confidence and more that he understands about this team at this point than where he was last year. And that wasn't all just on the personnel too. It was being in a new environment himself. He mentioned that today. All kinds of stuff that determined that. I like some of the comments. Guys know I'm pretty rough. I'm getting back with some of that. But thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. This is my reaction, my analysis to today's practice. I'm probably leaving a lot of stuff out right now as I try to remember everything. It's kind of all, probably tomorrow's show back in the 501, I'll have collected my thoughts, written out some specific notes. I've kind of run from one thing to another, and then trying to get this squeezed in before I get on the road. Or before that, I'm probably going to put some more content out and then get on the road. But this was a wonderful opportunity today, I think, because there's been so much buildup in our minds about what the potential is for this team. And then to see some of that, playing out in front of our eyes. I mean, I haven't even talked about Billy Richmond III or Carter Knox. They're both so strong, and they both are legit 6'6". And they're, Billy Richmond III just has that wow factor with him athletically. But some of the stuff looked like he's made strides in a maturity level in terms of decision making. He had a nice play where decision he made when he got into the paint with the ball. He didn't have a clear path to the rim like he always likes to have. But instead of making a bad play or maybe drawing a charge, he's the kind of guy that, he can pick up some offensive fouls, and that leads into his turnovers and that kind of thing. He had a nice little calm move, just one little turnaround, little mid-range shot just out the left side of the lane, nothing but net. He was challenged on another play on the baseline. Closeout came. He just pulled up for a 14-footer and knocked that down. We saw against St. John's when he led Arkansas with 16 points. Some of it wasn't all about those rim attacks. Some of it was a little nuance. He was throwing some wrinkles in there. I remember he hit a late mid-range shot after St. John's kind of made a run, and it was kind of one of those plays that you remember in these moments that maybe helped you get over the finish line. Calipari even said in the post-practice presser today that he sees his team, looking at what is last year, just guys getting better. They needed to not have droughts when teams would go on runs, just make one or two more baskets. And a lot of that was decision making. Who was taking the shot? Was it a strength where that player was taking a shot in their game? Remember, there are a lot of unforced turnovers and self-inflicted wounds. Sometimes you didn't even get a good shot. They lost their mind and started taking threes late against Texas Tech when they didn't need to. Those kind of things, when you get a veteran group back, a good core in your retention, he reminded us what we already know. Arkansas has the highest percentage in most categories of retention in the SEC, which is expected to be the best league in the land again. And so he's talking about now we just need to, not have situations where those things get out a little bit out of control, and now you're maybe not finishing the game right and maybe not winning the game. They got better toward the end of the year, but they still had those moments because even in some of those games they won, they blew multiple double-digit leads late. Remember that? Second half leads, sometimes at the 10-minute mark or even later. And it was kind of a landslide for a while, and it was just poor execution. So he identified that. It'd be interesting to see, because we didn't see a whole lot today, what specific drill work or how do they address that. What, getting players out of their comfort zone is one thing to maybe help with some of that, and they talk about that a lot. He mentioned that even though we saw a lot of team stuff today, they're still doing a lot of individual development stuff as well. So they're also working on that. But Calipari seemed energetic. Not only on the court, but he had a lot to say. It was our first real media opportunity with him, other than some of these scrums at some of these little events, which those are valuable too. But to get him now, one of the things I thought was interesting, and I talked about this dynamic this morning. I did an early Wednesday segment, about 20 minutes, and we noticed that Aiden Kelly has been added to the roster. And we've been talking about if that happens, it's probably it. That's 15, you're done. However, today I brought in the idea and the fact that with the new House bill, if you are grandfathered in as a walk-on, that you were a walk-on the previous year, you won't count if you return in that number. So effectively, you're still at 14 in terms of how that's viewed. We hadn't talked about that before, partly because when we started talking about it, the House bill wasn't done yet. But the other thing was, I haven't been clear personally, was Aiden Kelly truly a walk-on last year? Was he one of those back-end guys that was effectively a walk-on when you look at the role in playing time, but was actually on athletic scholarship? They split that up. And he was the one guy that I had more questions about that. Calipari today was talking about, in this presser, he brought up, he says, hey, I'm going out of town this weekend, and I'm going to go look at a player that I might add for this next roster. And he was talking in terms of maybe another developmental guy, maybe long-term, factoring into some long-term retention, which that probably answered the question right there, because they still expect, as far as I know, he didn't say anything to the contrary, the 2 international big guys coming in. In fact, he might have even alluded to, we got 2 more coming. So if he's going to look to add maybe 1 more, however he gets that done, that tells me, because Aiden Kelly, who was at practice today, he and Amir Brown were kind of like, they were used just a little bit. They really weren't in the drill work with the team. They were like guys that they set up on the wing for the guys that were doing the drills to close out on. So they were kind of used out there as props a little bit. But they were there, but Aiden Kelly took part. So if this tells me that he likely was a true walk-on last year, he's grandfathered in. If you look at the roster now, it's 13 names. That's because the 2 big guys aren't here. But they're coming in. That's 15. Adds 1 more at 16. But Aiden Kelly's grandfathered in. And again, this is something I covered. Went through all of this morning before we ever got here today. So I clued into maybe what that really is when Calipari says we might add another one here. I'm going to go watch him this weekend. So we'll see. He can't name names. He can't speak specifically or directly about recruits. I'm probably leaving a ton of stuff out. The good news is all of this interview will be online if it isn't already. It probably is on multiple places. You can go check it out. The interviews with the players and Calipari. Pig Trail Nation, who I work in concert with, we were having discussions when I was driving up here today that, maybe they could get an extra camera out there and just let it roll for the entire 15-minute window that we get. And so you might even be able to see an uninterrupted, whether it's Pig Trail Nation or some other outlet that did it, uninterrupted look at the full 15 minutes of court work. I have to chop mine up because I'm doing it off my camera on my phone. And so you just see little snippets, 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here, 30 seconds here. And it's interrupted, so you don't get the flow. So maybe there'll be a lot that everybody can absorb. I hope so, because it was really cool being in there. I thought something else that was really cool at the end of it, when practice was over, the players all moved and came toward the press. And they each player walked by each one of us and thanked us for being there and, dapped us up, high five, whatever, pounded up, that kind of thing. And so that was really cool, making eye contact with us. And I think this is the thing, when you have a coach like Calipari, you're teaching guys how to be professionals. You're teaching them how to go through everything, whether it's on the court or off the court, because everybody's got eyes on you and they remember body language, all these kind of things. And so, I think Trevon Brazil's taking a page out of it. Trevon Brazil looks like a man on a mission. Some of the other guys, Malik Thomas in the post-practice presser, some of his answers really stuck with me. They struck me as, man, he's starting to buy in. He gets what this culture needs to be about and how he needs to fit in. And not just be somebody that other people got to fit around him. He's got to fit in. DJ Wagner, as that veteran guy, the fact that, he may not start games at the 1. That's probably going to be A-Cuff. We'll see how they do it. But he's going to play a lot on the ball. But just this year 3 under Cal and second at Arkansas, and he's one of your main guys in that backcourt setting things up, I think that's huge. And I sensed from him in that post-practice presser that this is business for him as well. Not that they're not having fun, not that it's all, it's just work, but this idea that this means something to them. This is a run for something. And so, the more that we hear, when I do hear Calipari say more than once, guys need to get in the gym and work on this stuff. He said it last year when he was talking about 3-point shooting. He wants guys to really, so that's just a general statement. My guess is the staff, by one way or another, are drilling down with each guy. Here's what you need to work on. You probably need to spend this much time on this much time on this. You know, if you're not getting in there on your own, because they can only require them to be in there 4 hours a week right now. And so even when, so even before you're doing limited stuff or when they take a break, anything you can get in there and work on, the better. Not that you have to have a no tolerance policy for a guy not being in the gym a day or two for whatever reason, but for the most part, they need to be probably in there living it to be their best. I think Calipari continues to bring that kind of stuff up because he understands that it's going to take a lot of talented players at this level, and they're all trying to get to the NBA, and then the margins shrink for the select few that will actually get those jobs. I asked him about Adu Thero, and he spoke with beaming with pride. He said if not for the injury, he would have been a first rounder. We talked about that. I mentioned that, I asked him about, last year you had a top 20 defense. Thero was a big part of that, his defensive versatility. Do you have somebody that maybe helps fill that void, or collectively, how do you get it done? And he started talking about that, and then he said, we actually at times, or most of the time, had a top 10 defense last year. So staying top 20 probably wasn't enough. I think Kim Palm had him in the teens somewhere, but there may have been some categories certainly where they were top 10. The other thing he talked about was the shot blocking and how that's important to your defense. And so we've seen Brazil in the little video that Hogs Plus put out, I guess yesterday. We talked about it this morning on the early segment when I went through the 8 plays in that cut up, blocking either a shot or a lob pass. We saw him today in one of the videos I put out making a similar defensive play, and there was some other good stuff he did defensively. But he mentioned him by name, TB, and said some of those frontline guys are going to have to, block some shots and alter some shots, and that's a big part of what is needed. So we talked a lot when we were saying, what are the potential weaknesses? 3-point shooting, depth on the front line. We said physicality improved on the front line, but what about shot blocking? When you look at averages and statistics, maybe they took a little step back there if you're saying these players are who they are based on what they've done in their body of work before coming to Arkansas. But then I flip it to, well, we may see a lot consistently of Trevon Brazil on the court where we only got that the last 9 games. And so he'll block shots. Nick Pringle has had kind of been up and down in his career with that. Maybe in this system, maybe in this opportunity, we see more of that from him. Malik Ewan is athletic. He's a guy that Calipari, I think, mentioned, he and Pringle talked a couple of times about improving conditioning, but Malik Ewan can maybe give you something there. He says Carter Knox and Billy Richmond, certain guys are going to block shots. And that's true. I remember was it the St. John's game, I think, was the St. John's game where Carter Knox had a strong game, and he had 4 blocked shots in that game. We know Billy Richmond can erase some shots, so especially in transition. So a lot of good stuff today. We're going to have a follow-up show in the morning sometime, and I'll have collected my thoughts, and it won't be as much of a meander maybe. There's probably some juicy stuff I'm leaving out. I'm going to, regret that I didn't think about it while we were on here and had this opportunity now. But again, I thought pace was good. I can see that they're getting guys acclimated to getting up and down. That's always good. They put in that conditioning work again. I think this will be a better rebounding team. I didn't say that. I do. I think it'll be a better rebounding team than last year. We were already talking about that just based on numbers, guys bringing in like Pringle and Ewan. But I think, with those guys, Carter Knox, a locked-in TB, I mean, he was getting double-doubles at the end of the year. I think the last 9 games, he averaged over 11 points and over 9 rebounds per game. So I think this group is going to be tough defensively. They're going to be a team that excels in transition, slashing to the basket off 2-man game, and then picking and choosing off that because your guards can finish. I think Acuff is built, and his game is in his DNA where he likes little runners. He likes getting closer to the basket. We know DJ, that's really kind of his forte. So I think you look around. Knox and Billy Richmond III, we know they like getting downhill, so it doesn't have to all be transition. They're going to get a lot at the basket. How do they, a lot of question marks walking out today on the 3-point shooting. Certainly nobody's really banged up right now. Kareem Artal, I'll add this. Calipari said that he asked about him positionally. He said, well, he's kind of like a 3, can shoot a little bit. He maybe help you a little bit at the 4, kind of what we talked about, a 3-4 combo. And if you're just bare thin on the front line and you had some drastic emergency, he might be able to be on the court and give you some 4 minutes. I don't see him again as somebody that's factoring in, even when he's healthy, to a top 8 or 9 if they get their rotation. I think it's a solid 8, and then we see after that, is it a guy like Seeley, who I would say would be next, if you could envision a game in and game out predictable kind of role for him. I'm not there yet, but if it is going to be somebody, it'll probably be him first that I envision that for. But who knows? We got a lot of time to go. Things can and will change. Injuries might, don't want to bring it up to jinx it, but we saw that last year. So Calipari even said we had to make some tweaks and adjustments and change things based on what we didn't have, and they got better somehow. That's what happens when you recruit at a high level at every position for the key guys that you are going to count on. Even if you subtract 2 or 3 of them and one's hobbled, you have answers. And so I think they're in that situation again. But there are limitations to that, right? If you suffer too many injuries, you might be in peril. All right, nearly 36 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm Kevin McPherson. Things I think about that we didn't talk about today, I'm probably going to start with tomorrow. I'm probably going to try to summarize a little better than I did today with some of the other stuff, because we already talked about it, some of that good stuff, and I'm going to go back through and rewatch now on replay. If someone's got that full 15 minutes of action recorded and out there, I'm going to watch it with no interruptions, go back and watch the pressers. We'll have more to talk about. We'll talk throughout the week, but it was exciting to be in Fayetteville today. It's exciting to be in the Basketball Performance Center, and what I saw was mostly good, really good. Too soon to say this is great. I think what's great is that they're further along in what they're doing now than they were this time last year on the court this soon, and that, nobody's hurt. Again, I keep trying not to talk about that too much and jinx it, but if I said something was great, it would be maybe that combination of things. All right, really signing off now. Probably be back on, like I said, early in the morning, sometime tomorrow from the 501. Until then, take care of yourselves. Thanks for being here. Love all of you. See you soon.